Part 1 expanded approximately 700 words. Dust hung in the quiet Wyoming air like a veil of loneliness as Luke Harwood sat in the dim kitchen, rocking the tiny bundle in his arms. Outside, the wind dragged across the barren land, scraping against the old wooden siding of the ranch house. Inside, the silence felt heavier than any storm, broken only by the thin, desperate cries of the newborn clutched to his chest. Little Emma's wail cracked through the morning cold, sharp and heart-piercing. Her face was flushed, her tiny fists trembling with hunger. Luke shifted her gently, trying to soothe her, but she cried harder, as if she knew her father was barely holding himself together. He stared at the bottle on the table, empty again. The metal tin of formula beside it was nearly scraped clean. He had stretched every scoop the way a drowning man stretches his last breath, thinning it more and more until he knew it wasn't enough for her anymore. His big, rough hands shook as he rubbed her back. "I know, sweetheart," he whispered, his voice cracking. "I know you're hungry. Daddy's trying." But trying didn't seem to be enough. Grief pressed down on him like a yoke. Only 10 days ago, his wife, his bright, laughing Marla, had slipped away in the same bed where he had once laid beside her, dreaming of their future. Emma had lived, but Marla had not. The world had felt cruel before, but now it felt downright merciless. Luke swallowed hard, glancing at the window. Jagged pieces of the sky peeked through rolling clouds, threatening another storm. Winter had come early, and the nearest town with baby supplies was 50 miles away. The roads were iced solid, the ranch's generator had died the night before, and the last thing he had the strength to do was harness a horse and haul a wagon through frozen hell with a starving infant in his arms. He hadn't slept more than an hour at a time since the birth. His eyes burned, his chest ached. His beard had grown wild, dusted with tears he refused to admit he shed. Real cowboys didn't cry, real men didn't break, but tonight, he almost did. Emma coughed between cries, a thin, raspy sound that terrified him. He had heard the words of the doctor over and over. "She needs proper feeding, Luke. She needs strength, or her little body won't keep up. Don't wait too long to bring her back in. Bring her back in, to town, to the hospital, to help." But how? How could he leave when she wouldn't last the ride? How could he stay when staying was killing her slowly? Luke pressed his cheek against the baby's soft head. She smelled like milk that wasn't enough and blankets that had been washed too many times. She felt warm, but her limbs trembled with exhaustion. He rocked her until his arms ached. The house was too quiet, too empty, too full of things that reminded him of the woman who used to fill these rooms with warmth. The floral apron still hanging on its hook, the quilt on the back of the couch she had sewn during pregnancy, the unfinished cradle he had promised he'd sand smooth, before the baby comes. He choked on a breath. Marla wasn't going to finish the cradle. He wasn't sure he could finish anything. Emma's cries softened to whimpers, only because she was too weak to keep screaming. And then, just as Luke felt something in him crack at the edges, a sudden knock tore through the silence. A sharp, urgent knock. 3 quick raps. Luke froze. No one came out this far without calling. No ranch hands were scheduled, no neighbors lived close enough to walk in a storm like this, and certainly no strangers would be traveling these roads. His heart thudded painfully. He laid Emma carefully in the cradle, though she whimpered in protest, and grabbed the rifle resting by the door. Not because he wanted a fight, but because an isolated rancher lived by caution. Part 2 expanded approximately 700 words. Luke didn't know how to breathe for a moment. Shock and relief tangled in his chest like barbed wire. He had spent days alone with Emma, her cries echoing through the empty rooms, and now, just when he thought he was at the end of his strength, a stranger, a woman, had appeared, offering help. But it wasn't just any help. She could feed the baby. She could save her. The woman stepped inside, brushing snowflakes from her damp hair. Luke noticed the way her hands trembled as she closed the door behind her, as though she were afraid of disturbing the fragile life in his home. Every movement she made radiated tenderness. Luke, who was usually confident with animals and cattle, felt utterly useless. This woman had appeared out of the storm, and in an instant, she held a power over his world that he had long lost: hope. "I'm Clara," she murmured softly, her voice carrying the faint warmth of a summer breeze. "My wagon broke down 2 miles back. I've been walking since dawn. I lost my baby 3 weeks ago," she said, and her words cracked as her eyes welled with tears. "My body hasn't realized he's gone. When I heard your little girl crying from the road, I couldn't just walk past." Luke's throat tightened. The baby, sensing the presence of another adult, kicked weakly and whimpered. Emma's cries sharpened, desperate for nourishment, and Clara's gaze softened, drawn irresistibly toward her. "May I?" she asked gently, indicating the crib. Luke felt tears sting his eyes. Yes," he said, his voice thick, barely audible. He stepped aside, his hands empty, powerless, as Clara knelt before the cradle. She lifted Emma with remarkable care, as though handling the most precious thing in the world. The baby's eyes widened, taking in the warmth and scent of Clara's skin. Luke watched in awe as Emma's desperate cries slowed, then softened, and finally gave way to a quiet suckling as Clara guided her tiny mouth to her breast. The sound was immediate and miraculous. Luke had never heard anything so fragile and fierce. The little girl's tiny hands clutched at Clara's arms, the tension in her body melting with every rhythmic suck. Luke felt a lump in his throat and sat heavily on the counter edge, unsure if he should speak or simply watch the miracle unfold. Clara's eyes were brimming with tears, yet she smiled through her grief, humming softly, a lullaby she didn't realize she was singing. "There you go, sweet girl. Eat as much as you need," she whispered. Her voice was soft, melodic, grounding, the kind of voice that made the world pause. Luke's heart ached as he realized Emma's little body was beginning to relax, drawing life from someone who had herself suffered loss. The storm outside rattled the windows, but inside, the cabin felt warmer than it had in months. The wind's fury and the snowstorm's bite seemed distant, irrelevant. For the first time since Marla had died, Luke felt the oppressive weight of grief lighten, if only slightly. He hadn't expected hope to arrive in the form of a stranger with full breasts, yet here it was, quiet and undeniable. Minutes passed in a peaceful rhythm. The baby nursed, sighing with relief, while Clara hummed, eyes soft and distant. Luke finally found his voice. I didn't know how to keep her fed. I didn't know how to do it," he admitted, his voice rough. "I've been trying everything, formula, whatever I could make, but she was starving." Clara glanced up at him, tears streaking her cheeks. "It's all right," she said gently. "You didn't fail her. She just needed someone who could give her more than you could right now. And now, she's okay." Her hands continued to cradle Emma as the baby's tiny fingers curled around her thumb. Luke's chest tightened with gratitude. He leaned against the counter, exhaustion weighing heavily on him. "I haven't slept more than an hour a night since she passed," he confessed, his voice dropping. The words were heavy, but Clara didn't flinch. She understood, in ways words couldn't convey. "I've lost a child too," Clara whispered. Her voice trembled, and she swallowed hard. "I walked for miles, hoping to find something, anything, that could make the pain less unbearable. When I heard her crying, it felt like, I don't know, like I could do something right again." Luke exhaled slowly, feeling the tightness in his chest begin to ease. For the first time, he realized he wasn't entirely alone. Someone who had suffered loss, someone who understood grief and fragility, was here. Someone who could save his daughter when he couldn't. Part 3 expanded approximately 700 words. The wind battered the cabin walls like a relentless drum, rattling the windows and shaking the old wooden beams, but inside, the little house glowed with a warmth Luke hadn't felt since Marla had been alive. The storm outside was fierce, white and unyielding, but it seemed irrelevant now. Inside, the fragile rhythm of life continued, Emma sleeping peacefully in Clara's arms, and the soft hum of her lullaby filling the room with an almost sacred serenity. Luke sat on the edge of the counter, exhausted yet wide awake, watching the woman who had saved his daughter. Her movements were careful, deliberate, every action infused with a tenderness that made his chest ache. The way she held Emma, cradling her small head and shifting her tiny body gently against her own, was almost reverent. He had raised cattle and tended to horses for years, but nothing in his life had prepared him for this, watching someone nurture his child with such selfless care. "You handle her like you've known her forever," Luke said quietly, his voice low, hesitant, as if speaking too loudly would shatter the fragile peace around them. Clara's lips curved into a faint, bittersweet smile. "I was a mother," she whispered, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I guess some things, some instincts, they don't fade." She shifted Emma gently, who stirred slightly but didn't wake, her tiny body nestled safely against Clara's warmth. The room was silent for a moment, save for the soft breathing of the baby and the occasional groan of the wind outside. Luke felt a lump in his throat. His mind raced, remembering Marla's laughter, the light she brought into the house, the way she had planned every detail of Emma's nursery, every little thing to make their home alive with love. That light had been extinguished, and yet now, somehow, it flickered again, unexpected, fragile, in the form of this stranger who had arrived at the precise moment when he had nearly given up. Clara's voice broke through his thoughts. "My husband died last winter. Our boy, he didn't live long after," she said, her eyes distant, haunted by memories. "I didn't know where to go, or what to do, so I just kept walking." Her gaze softened, landing on Luke. "And then I heard her crying. I thought, maybe life hadn't completely stopped yet." Luke swallowed hard. He had never been good with words, never able to express the depth of his feelings. But looking at Clara, seeing the pain etched into her eyes, yet also the strength, he felt a warmth spreading through him, a tentative hope. "I'm sorry," he said quietly, his voice thick, "for everything you've lost, and for everything I've lost too." Clara reached out a hand, brushing a snowflake from his coat, a small gesture that carried weight beyond words. "We can't change what's gone," she said softly. "But maybe we can care for what's still here." Her eyes flicked to Emma, sleeping peacefully. Then back to him. "She needs love. And, maybe we both do too." The storm outside continued its relentless assault, but the cabin felt insulated, safe, almost sacred. Luke moved closer to the chair, his eyes fixed on the tiny life sleeping in Clara's arms. "When the storm clears," he said slowly, "I can help fix your wagon. Get you back on the road." Clara's eyes lingered on him, searching. "Do you want me to leave?" she asked, her voice almost a whisper, fragile like the snowflakes clinging to her coat. Luke paused. He glanced at Emma, then back at Clara. His chest ached with a combination of grief, exhaustion, and longing he hadn't felt in weeks. "I think," he said slowly, each word deliberate, "that Emma wants you to stay." Clara's breath caught, and her lips parted in surprise. "And what about you, Luke?" she asked softly, her eyes wide, searching for an answer she didn't yet know existed. He met her gaze, and for the first time in nearly 2 weeks, he allowed himself to be vulnerable. "I haven't wanted anything in a long time," he admitted, his voice barely audible. "But, I want you here." The words hung in the air, fragile and trembling, yet powerful in their honesty. Clara's eyes filled with tears, but she smiled, a smile that spoke of hope, of understanding, of beginnings. She shifted Emma slightly, placing her back in the cradle so she could look fully at Luke. "Then I'll stay," she whispered. "As long as you'll have me." The cabin fell into a profound silence, but it was not empty. It was full of warmth, full of life, full of the quiet promise of new beginnings. Outside, the storm raged on, indifferent to the fragile lives inside. But inside, a new family was forming, born not just of circumstance, but of shared loss, compassion, and a flicker of hope that refused to be extinguished. Luke reached for her hand, a tentative, hopeful gesture. Clara took it, her grip firm yet gentle, anchoring both of them in this moment. The fire crackled in the stove, casting dancing shadows on the walls, painting their tiny cabin in golden amber light. For the first time in weeks, Luke felt a stirring of peace, of possibility. Emma slept soundly, her tiny chest rising and falling with ease. Clara hummed a soft lullaby, the melody wrapping around them like a shield against the world outside. And as the storm continued to fall, relentless and unyielding, inside that little cabin, hope endured. A family, unexpected, fragile, but alive, had begun to take root, and nothing could destroy what had been born in the quiet courage of a stranger who knocked at the right moment, carrying warmth, life, and love in her arms. If you want, I can also create hyper-realistic image prompts for all 3 parts, perfect for thumbnails or storytelling visuals. It would make your story visually stunning and ready for social media or video content. Do you want me to do that next?